Welcome to day 4, the penultimate day of our 5-day GDPR challenge. Hope you're all enjoying the challenges so far and you're all learning something from these sessions. And I hope you've all got a good data breach plan after yesterday. Thanks to those who came along to the workshop at 5 o'clock last night. It was great to have a conversation with you and discuss how you were doing with those plans and where your issues were. And so, thanks for that. And so we move on to day 4, as I say, the penultimate day. Just one more day to go after today. And today we are going to be looking at DPIAs and privacy by design and why they're important, why you need to worry about them. You have to excuse me, I seem to have got a little bit of a sore throat today, but we'll press on. So data protection impact assessments or data privacy impact assessments, you might hear them referred to by either of those two terms. Some people say data protection, some people say data privacy. Either way, it's a DPIA. DPIA is the same. So just what exactly is a DPIA? It's a analysis of the situation in any new data process that you are looking at implementing across your organization. And you might also need to do one historically for a process you've already got in operation. And basically it's about looking at the risk to personally identifiable information or data subjects data and looking at what you want to do. Why do you want to do it? Is there any other way you could do it which wouldn't affect people's personal data or would have less risk to their personal data? And if you do identify risks within the DPIA, then the final step of the DPIA is looking at what measures you could put in place to mitigate those risks. So, if there's something you identify is a real risk to someone's data as part of that process, then is there something you could do to mitigate that risk, to lessen that risk to the data? And if so, what is it? Can you do it? And what would the effect be if you did carry out that mitigation? So it might be that you have a process which you originally evaluate and you think actually the risk to the data there is quite high. I'll give you an example. One of my clients was looking at outsourcing their payroll to an outside bureau, quite a normal thing to do. What we identified at the time was in their original plan for how to do it, the original plan for how to do it was to email a Excel spreadsheet with people's hours on, and other payroll information on, albeit protected by a password. But to email that as an attachment with the password being sent in a separate email, hopefully, to the payroll bureau. So the payroll bureau could then open it, process that data, and then the idea was that they would then send back, again via email, a PDF, a password protected PDF, with everybody's payslips in it. And we looked at that and thought, well, yeah, you could do that, but there is actually a risk there to people's personal data twice, because there's a risk when you're sending the spreadsheet to the payroll bureau, and clearly there's also a risk when the bureau sends the payslips back to the organization. If we're doing that as attachments to email, I mean, even though we're sending it via SSL, so therefore, there should be a secure socket there, and so the data is encrypted. Nonetheless, it's not exactly a safe way of doing it. What if that email address that you're sending it to has been spoofed, is not the real email address that you think you're sending it to? What if you made a typo in the email address, send it to the wrong person? And so what we looked at there in order to mitigate it was, instead of transferring it via email, could we look at transferring it via a third-party file transfer provider, somebody like WeTransfer? I should add, got no commercial ties with WeTransfer. It's just an organisation that we've used on several occasions. But they do provide the ability to transfer data, still encrypt it, but this time it's not travelling by email. It's going via their server, which is more trusted, hopefully. Certainly more difficult for for a bad actor to get into, and just layers that extra layer of protection. And so we in the DPIA for that process said that was what could be done to mitigate some of the risk. It doesn't remove the risk, but it maybe takes the risk from, say, a medium to low. And so it made sense to do it. And fortunately, in that case, the client agreed with us and went ahead and did it that way, which meant we could sign off a DPIA. And I'll come to about sign off to DPIA right at the end. When's a DPIA required? Really, any time you're putting in a new process that might endanger people's personal information or data subjects' information. It's in law. It says it's required for any process that you perform regularly. So what does that mean? Well, it means if it's something like payroll, excuse me, where you're going to be doing that every month, then yes, you need to do it. You need to do a DPIA, without a doubt. If it's a one-off, you're sending people's names and email addresses to a company who are going to do fulfillment. No, I'll change that. You send people's names and home addresses to a company who are going to do fulfillment for Christmas. They're going to send each of your employees a bottle of whiskey for Christmas. Don't need to do a DPIA, really, because the data's not that sensitive, and you're doing it once. So in those instances, you don't have to do a DPIA. Nothing stops you doing a DPIA. You can do a DPIA in every single process if you really, really want to. But it's primarily aimed at those things that you do more than once. So what are steps in the DPIA? The first step is actually identifying the need for the DPIA. Why do you need to do a DPIA? What are you doing? What are you doing to the data that makes you think you need a DPIA? Identify the need. Then describe the process. So what are you going to do? What are you going to do to the data? Why are you doing it? What happens to the data? Where does it go? Where does it sit? Is it encrypted all the time? Is it encrypted when it's at rest? Is it encrypted when people are moving it from one place to another? So describe the process, and it can often help to draw a diagram for that. And when to describe the process, if a flowchart makes it easier to understand the process, then draw a flowchart. A flowchart can be part of your DPIA. And then, do you need wider consultation? So if you're doing something that's only affecting a few people, and you're doing something that's fairly common, let's say a new payroll system, you don't need any wider consultation. Probably you might want to run it past your accountant. But other than that, and obviously if you've got a DPO, you want to run it past the DPO. In fact, the DPO is probably helping you do the DPIA. But otherwise, do you need wider consultation? No, you don't. However, you need to consider whether you need wider consultation and document that you've considered it, and you consider that you don't. If you were doing something absolutely radically new, something that no one else was doing to personal data, you almost certainly would need to do wider consultation. You need to go out to the people it's going to affect. You might need to survey your workforce if it's something to do with your employees and say, how do you feel about this? Do you want to do this? Do you see the benefit of doing this? But in 9 out of 10 cases, you probably don't need to do wider consultation. You need to assess the necessity and the proportionality of doing the DPIA. Again, if it's affecting lots of people's data, or the data is particularly sensitive, it's a no-brainer. You've got to do a DPIA. And you've got to take notice of the outcome of the DPIA. But if it is relatively low-key, then you might get away with a DPIA that's just one sheet of paper. Doesn't need to be a great, big, massive document if it's a relatively simple process. Again, it's all about proportionality. As I say, you then need to identify and assess the risks to data and the risks to data integrity and document those risks. And try and be as broad as you can. Try and think of as many risks as you can. And then, as I said earlier, identify and assess the remedial measures that you can take to mitigate some of that risk, or all of that risk. Some cases you can eliminate the risk, but in lots of cases you can't actually eliminate it, but you can drastically reduce the risk. And then you document the DPIA outcomes. So you document what the outcome of the DPIA is. Is the risk so high that really you shouldn't continue? Or is the risk manageable? Or is the risk absolutely minor? Document it. If the risk is so, this is where it differs if you have a DPO or not, a data protection officer or not. If you have a data protection officer and they perform a DPIA and their advice in the DPIA is that you should not go ahead with whatever it is as a process, you as a business can still override that advice. You can choose to ignore the DPIA, the DPO's advice. However, I would strongly advise you not to, because if there is a problem in the future and it's documented that your DPO said don't go ahead with this and yet you still decided to, the ISO is not going to look on you very favourably at all. You are going to be looking at probably seeing yourselves in a magistrate's court. And I would suggest for most people, you don't want to do that. So unless you've got a damn good reason why you need to do it the way you want to do it, work with your DPO to find a way that you can do what you want to do, and or occasionally accept that you can't. And by the way, a couple of things here with DPOs. If your DPO is directly employed by you, i.e. they're one of your employees that are on the payroll, you can't sack them because they've said in a DPIA you shouldn't go ahead. It'd be unfair dismissal. It would lead to all sorts of problems. You cannot sack somebody, a DPO, if they say you can't go ahead, because the DPO has to be able to make independent view. The same's true, by the way, if you use an external DPO. If you use someone like myself as an external DPO, and I judge through a DPIA for you, and I say I don't think this process is safe to go ahead, you can't refuse to pay my invoice because I've said that. DPOs, I have that protection written into law. And so, sometimes you have to be fair, I have to say that in all the times I've been doing DPIAs, probably only less than 10% of them have I said, no, you can't go ahead. And in all but probably 2% of them, we've actually, by working together, found a way that we can mitigate the risk so that the process can go ahead. I only have one case that I'm aware of where both myself, this is a big company, they had their own internal DPO. Their internal DPO said, don't go ahead. They engaged me as their external DPO. I looked at it and said, don't go ahead. They sought legal counsel, i.e. advice from a barrister, who said, don't go ahead. Yet they still went ahead. To date, The risks we thought would happen to data have not materialized, but I'm pretty damn sure they will. And when time comes, then that company's going to find itself in a difficult situation. Please don't do it. Your DPO should be somebody with integrity and somebody with good common sense, good knowledge of the system. So they say, don't do it. Don't do it. Find a different way. Which is all about then privacy by design. What does that mean? It means think about, excuse me, it means think about data protection first. So don't design your new business process and right at the end think, oh, now we better do DPIA. But we've written all the code now, or we've produced all the stuff now, or whatever. Don't do it that way round. Engage with your DPO or whoever's doing that role for you right at the start of the new process. Build in the privacy by design, as it says. Build it in. It actually makes a damn sight better system. And it gives you less grief. Yes, it might cost you more money on day one. But hey, would you rather have that money on day one or get right to the end and then find you've got to do massive modifications? Doesn't make sense, does it? So make sure you engage DPO right at the start of a new process so that purpose is designed in from the beginning, from the outset. And that's it for today. And for the last time this week, I've got a task for you before tomorrow. Think of something new that you're thinking of doing for your business, your organization, and do a mini DPIA for it. Go through the steps of this video, watch it again, get the different steps, go through the different steps, see what outcome you come out with. I'd love to know what outcome you come out with. Let's discuss it at the workshop tomorrow afternoon. This afternoon, Thursday afternoon at 5 p.m. And don't forget, tomorrow, the workshop's an hour earlier. It's at 4 p.m. Because we're going to have it as like a wash-up of the week. But we do have something new as well tomorrow. So if you've got any questions, you know my details by now. There's my email address. If it's really urgent, give me a call on my mobile phone, but preferably use my email address. I hope you found this useful as the other videos that you've had this week. I look forward to seeing a lot of you at the 5 o'clock session this afternoon. If I don't do that, and then look out for the next video, the final video of the challenge tomorrow. And with that, thank you very much. Have a good rest of your day, and I will see you tomorrow.